So good afternoon. Thank you everyone for coming. Well said. I think this is mostly an inspirational a sharing actually of an experience rather than a scientific talk like we heard earlier on. And actually what I'd like to do is share what I went through, the goods and the bads, mainly the goods, after spending a year in Antarctica. And that I did in 2014. I was there as, I'm a medical doctor, I was there doing some medical research. And this is the place that I had to live in for a year. And the reason is that it gets so cold that you can't really live for 9 out of 12 months in a year. That is because the temperature does not allow for vehicles to fly in or out of the place. So this is all you get to see for a year. It's a plateau actually. We heard before that altitude plays a role in many things, and we were on top of a bit higher than 3,000 meters actually, and in a tiny base. So the reason I was there was that I was working for the European Space Agency. One thing I'd always like to mention is what is the European Space Agency, and because all of us are familiar with what happens in space on the NASA side, for example, but not so much in Europe. So the European Space Agency is a collaboration of countries, as you see here. Greece is among them since 2005, and it's basically Europe's gateway to space. This means satellites for applications like something similar to the global positioning system, for missions to other planets like Mars, robotic missions, but also for having astronauts in space. So there are European astronauts that live here in the International Space Station, which goes around us about 16 to 18 times a day. And this is a space laboratory. Actually, if you live here without gravity, everything is different. And your body and psychology go through a lot of different situations as compared to living here. So this research is not only conducted by ESA in space, but also in space analogs. Now, what is a space analog? If it's easy to imagine or not. A space analog is a place or facility that simulates what happens to you in space. So, for example, this is a space analog. It's a station in Utah, in the US. You have a little research station, a hub, and this is in a desert, which looks a bit like Mars. And you have people that live here for a certain amount of time, and they simulate their life on Mars. So they go out, and of course there's oxygen, there's gravity at an Earth level, but they have to wear a mock-up of a spacesuit. And this is because you can get more out of doing research in analogs than in space. In space you just have 6 people or 10. You can't really have a statistical sample. If you do research in analogs, you deduce stuff about mental and physiological health that you can't get easily from the small sample of astronauts. So this is actually why I was in this place. Here, unfortunately, you cannot see it. I apologize in advance because of the contrast. Some of the night pictures are not so visible. So this is the station I was in the middle of Antarctica. And as you see, it actually does have a lot of stressors that are common in space, and it's an extreme environment. So as I mentioned in the beginning, you are isolated. So for 9 months, whatever you do, you cannot leave. Whatever may come, even in the worst medical scenario, you cannot leave the base. It's impossible. And you're also confined. You cannot walk further away than 1 kilometer for 9 months. So this is not so different from space, not in the International Space Station that is just above the Earth, but for future missions. And as you may know, actually, the European Space Agency plans some future missions to the moon, to stay there. Not like Neil Armstrong just to go and return, but to live for 6 months or more. And this is interesting also from the perspective that is relative to this conference, which is physiology and maybe sports physiology. You have very different conditions. And I remember that the European Space Agency does conduct research on how exercise adapts in these environments. So on top of all that, you're in a very dry place. It's high in a plateau, so you suffer from, your breath is short. The oxygen is low. You need more calories to do the same effort than you would do here much more easily. And you know, you're quite south, so actually the day and night cycle is different. And this impacts you also in psychology and in terms of sleep. So all of this combined, plus you're in an international crew, communication is not always easy. It kind of simulates how astronauts live in space. And here is actually a sketch from NASA. It's an idea for a future base on Mars. And I just wanted to include it because it's rather similar to what we had. So here I was. You may notice that this base, it's called Concordia. This means collaboration or harmony. It's because it's supported by 2 countries, Italy and France. And we were 13 people in the winter. So in the summer, when the planes can fly in and out, we have as many as 60 or 70 people who come for maintenance or, But in the isolation period, you just have 13. It's you, for good or bad, it's all you get. And concerning surroundings, because surroundings are very important in terms of weather, of what you see, of the stimulation you have. Just a couple of things about Antarctica. It was quite a surprise for me to notice that it's a continent so huge that is about 1.5 times the size of Europe. And because it's so sparsely populated, actually no one lives there permanently. We just go for research and come back. For example, a lot of maps that we saw today in presentations omit it completely, which is natural. No one lives there forever, so why include it? But it's quite funny to realize that such a massive piece of land and ice exists on the planet and plays such a role in climate and environment, and it's not so evident in our heads. So on top of that, Antarctica is a very peaceful and protected continent, the most peaceful and protected. There is a treaty, the Antarctic Treaty, with many signatories, which prohibits arms, but also animals and plants for going there. So foreign animals and plants cannot go into Antarctica. This was, of course, enforced after the early explorers used huskies and ponies to try to conquer the pole. And this is to protect the natural flora and fauna. And here you see the research stations that exist, and only 4 of them are in the mainland. So 1, 2, 3, and there's Chinese one here, I think. We were one of the stations on the mainland. That's why it's more remote. And of course, going there is quite a funny trip. And in my case, I had to start in Thessaloniki with a plane to Athens, then to Dubai, I think, yeah, then to Singapore, then to Sydney, then to Christchurch in New Zealand, then to the Antarctic coast, and then you go to the mainland, where you'll stay for good. And the funny thing is you use some planes which have skis, and they land on the frozen sea. So this actually is not land, this is the frozen sea. It's quite scary if you think of it during the landing process. So the way back was even funnier. You can either come back by plane again, or, as was the case for me, I had to come back with an icebreaker, a tiny icebreaker. And it's quite funny, because speaking of climate, with the global warming, the ice is less and less in Antarctica. This is monitored. But you have local effects. So locally, I took a plane from the mainland to the coast, and here I took an icebreaker to Australia. It's reversed, by the way. So there was a local event here, in terms of weather, where the ice was much thicker than expected. And despite being on an icebreaker, we couldn't break the ice. So we were stuck for about a month, actually, just here, waiting for the ice to melt a little bit so the ship can get through. This is quite funny, but it should not make us deduce the wrong assumptions. The climate change exists in a larger scale, and it's bad for us. It's not like, oh, we have more ice, everything's perfect, we shouldn't do anything. It's not like that. So on the good side, as I was stuck there for about a month, actually half a month in this station, in the coast, this was not where I was living, and another 15 days in the ship, just waiting. The good thing is I got to see the fauna of Antarctica, because in the station of the mainland, there is no life at all. It's just people. There is no animals or birds or plants. So you can imagine that a year there is quite annoying. You don't have anything to catch your imagination. And here is where you stay. This is coming back to the mainland of Antarctica. So you spend a year in a little room like this, And this is mainly to signify that we humans are particularly bad in cooperation or working together from different cultures and nationalities and disciplines. And this is something I learned from the International Space University, where I had the pleasure to do my master's, and which is also my connection with Dr. Fleuris and some others. So in our station, we were people from technical and scientific backgrounds, and it was not always easy to get together, to work together, or from different nationalities. So if you live, this is your room, by the way, that's all you get. Of course, you have some common spaces, but it's not so much. So it's not always easy to collaborate. Imagine this on the scale of climate change. How demanding is to tell nations that just now begin to be industrialized that, you know, we, the Western world, had our fun time and we created an impact, but now you that are catching up, no, you have to do it the right way. It's really, communication is really an essential issue if you want to achieve something. And this is our crew. So it was 13 of us, 1 woman, 12 men. She was quite brave. And this is just to illustrate again that you go through a lot of things that are unexpected. By the way, this acronym, ICE, it doesn't just stand for the ice you get to see for an entire year. It means isolated and confined environments. And once again, your sleep gets very messy. You cannot really sleep because during the winter there is no daylight. So in the same way, you have monotony, nothing to see around you, nothing at all. And you do get bored of watching movies and studying books after a point. And all the other things that we mentioned earlier, including the psychological impact on yourself. And here, again, coming to the issue of weather and climate, it's quite a particular spot because you don't have many changes in weather. It's extremely infrequent to snow. You don't get rain. It's mainly sunshine, sometimes cloudy. But the temperatures are quite different. So in the summer, the warmer it got ever, and this was actually a historical high, it was minus 14 degrees Celsius. It was the first time ever that on this place, minus 14 has been reached. It was a bit alarming. But in the winter, you go as low as minus 80. So that's quite cold. And that's why you need to wear some specific suits to cover every little inch of your skin. By the way, this is the summer, so we're still relaxed. In the winter, you really have to be meticulous. And this is just to show how the day and night is just the same, really. I mean, here it's 12 in the afternoon, and here is midnight. No change at all. And similarly, in the winter, the previous one was in the summer. So in the winter, the sun doesn't come up from the horizon. So this is midday, and it's honestly what you get at 11:30, like half an hour before midnight in Greece. This is midday in the polar winter. And when you go to midnight in Antarctica, of course here you have some very strong lights, because otherwise you can't see anything. It's pitch black. So it's quite a particular place. And on top of all that, we had to do some medical research. So given the circumstances, what we look at is things that you can find out about our bodies and minds, which are difficult to simulate elsewhere. But I want to stress out that this research is not done just to help astronauts or people in Antarctica. The implications come to society. And it's very important to think in a bit of a personalized way. As a matter of fact, we had an experiment for sleep. We were sleeping very badly during the polar winter. But the result that comes out is not just to fix sleep in Antarctica. You can fix people that have pathologies, sleep disorders, here. So by the way, this is me trying to take blood from myself, because I was the one that had to test myself as well and be a good example for others. The research is voluntary. No one is forced to participate or cannot be paid to participate. And so actually this was my job. As a medical doctor, I had to conduct the experiments, which were proposed by European universities, and keep the people motivated. And the latter was a bit more challenging. Luckily, there was a European astronaut, a German astronaut, Alex Gerst, in space. And his mission was concurrent with our mission. So it was funny sometimes to, it's all over the media, to see how he got to do research on himself in space for pretty much the same reasons. So that was something that kept us motivated. And here's just a short example. Actually, it was to combine nutrition, psychology, and altitude, because we were so high, 3 kilometers high. Once again, the oxygen was low, so you had to consume a lot more energy to do the same stuff. And here's a series of tests we had, indirect calorimetry, which I think we mentioned earlier on, blood samples, weight, measurements, and a few others. And by the way, this is me with a lot of beard, because you're just in Antarctica, you don't care so much. But the purpose of this was to correlate all of this together. It's really important to look in the big picture, not just in a small detail. And it was not just medical things. One of my favorite experiments was this one. So there is a series of filters to recycle water in Antarctica. And my job as a doctor there was to check if the water is potable or if it's contaminated through the filters and through reuse. Does anyone know why would someone bother to recycle water in Antarctica? I mean, you have all the ice around you. The reason is that actually all the countries that maintain stations in Antarctica are forced, by the Antarctic Treaty that we mentioned before, to carry all the waste out, back into the rest of the world. And this is extremely costly if you think of carrying wastewater from 13 people for a year, including washing the dishes or having showers or anything actually, or washing equipment. So it's quite clever to recycle it, and it's of course environment friendly. And the bonus you get out of it is that this technology, when it works, is applied elsewhere. It's applied in space. Actually, the International Space Station has a recycling system that is similar, an advancement, obviously, of this one. But also in areas like Morocco and maybe in the future also Greece, which, as we learned, will be hit quite severely by the climate change if we don't change our practices. It's good to have things like that. You can recycle the water you use when we go into drier and hotter periods. And of course, recycling is of the essence. And this is quite funny, actually. It was just outside my room. You have a separate bin for paper, for plastic, for aluminum, for polyethylene, and one in the middle to put whatever doesn't fit the other ones. And there is a truss compactor, so everything is reduced in size to make sure it's more environment friendly, and a biological disintegrator. So if you waste some food, if you can't eat more, if it's about to go bad, you just put it here. There are some tiny bacteria here that reduce it in size. And these are practices that some of them were really new to me, but they really got me into thinking more environmentally. And I think this was the first sunset I saw, because when you arrive in Antarctica, it's the summer. So for 3 months, 3 consecutive months, there is only sunshine, not a night, ever. And this was the first sunset, sorry. So what do I mean? That you're in a place without external stimulation, isolated, but there is still natural beauty, lots of it. There is just ice around, but the things you get to witness are quite inspiring. And you see things like that. So this is actually the sun, and there is a halo around. I don't know if it's very evident. It's the first time I've seen something like that. You can't really see it in a city, or for many reasons. And this was a highlight for me. It was the night sky. It's the clearest sky you can see everywhere on the Earth. It's the clearest sky on the planet. And you just go out of the station, it's dark, and immediately, in 30 seconds, you can see the Milky Way passing above you. I had some photos like that, but I'm afraid that due to the lights we have to keep on for the video, it's not so visible. You're welcome to look into them later if you want. Similar here, you see the Aurora, the southern lights. This is the same as the Aurora Borealis, just on the other hemisphere. So you see this and you realize there is a profound impact of you because of things that you have never felt living in a city. I was this kind of person. I had gone to a rural area just for vacation. And all of this combined makes you think that, am I doing enough to maintain this for my lifetime and for the people to come? And you see the Milky Way, which Actually, now you don't, and maybe because we're in the city. Well, anyway, but you see the stars, and as you know late from the last research, there is roughly one planet around every star, maybe more. So you think that maybe, there is 1,000 Earths. It's fine. Well, we can't reach them, but maybe the future generations can. Well, can they? Because actually we're destroying the planet with climate change much faster than the advancement we're making to reach other worlds. But even if we could, this doesn't mean we have to get rid of this planet or waste it. And it's very easy to talk about this. I had some kind of sentiments for the environment even before. But after going to Antarctica, they're much stronger. This is a reason, actually. You've heard about the ozone layer probably since a long time. Me, I remember the first day I heard about it. I was at school and I went back home and I asked my mother, are we in trouble because of the ozone layer and because, And she said, yeah, of course you have to be careful, but don't worry so much. Just be careful in the summer. It's not even over Greece, mostly. But then you go to Antarctica and you realize that, oh, I'm in the place that is mostly affected by the ozone layer, by the thinning of the ozone layer. So you don't really notice the trouble. It's nowhere to be seen. But you do think about it. And you go out in the summer, you're covered, but maybe, in the sun it's a bit warm, and you're thinking twice about what you're going to do and all the reflection you get from the ice. So you do develop a stronger environmental conscience. And maybe this is also because you have some time to really appreciate the surroundings. You can't live, it's a given. And here is me. This was in the polar winter. And we decided to do something active. So we decided to take part in the World Environment Day, should be somewhere here, on behalf of the European Space Agency. And we had to come up with a slogan. So we thought about recycling, we're good in this, but no, actually we thought about, to motivate yourself, first of all, you have to think about what will go wrong if you don't do what you have to do, if you don't force yourself to make an effort. So our station, Concordia, in the mainland of Antarctica, so happens to be on top of 3 kilometers of ice. There is no land below. So if climate change melts the ice of Antarctica, no one can live in this place in the future. Okay, I admit it's hard to melt 3 kilometers of ice in the next few years, but if we keep this pace, maybe at some time it will happen. So could you imagine this? I could actually imagine myself in a floating station in the middle of some barren land where Antarctica is today. And that's where the title of this presentation comes from. So white is the new green. This was the title of a blog entry about the World Environment Day. White is obviously Antarctica, and green is obviously recycling and thinking and acting about the environment. And what I'd like to take out of this is to keep the perseverance to continue acting in a good way about the environment here. And this is actually by Buzz Aldrin, the second man to step on the moon. When he looked around in the chute and everything, he said, my God, it's a desolation, it's a desert, there is nothing. But it's a magnificent desolation. And this was similar to what we felt. This is really what you see in 1 year. There is nothing else, nothing. But with the sunsets, with the sky, with the time you have with yourself, you really appreciate it. So even the least hospitable places of this planet are worth preserving. And obviously, Antarctica is the new green, maybe, but can it be greener? I think yes. And this is the engine we had for producing heat. It's very important. If this fails, we die. It's simple as that. And there is a reason that there are not enough solar cells in Antarctica. The reason is it's not yet reliable enough to say that for sure you stay with solar cells for a year and you'll survive. No, we're not certain. Maybe if, in the winter we don't have the sun at all. So it's being tested, but we still have fossil fuels. What else can you improve in Antarctica? Well, you have some rules with the Antarctic Treaty to respect the environment fully, but they're not always respected. There are countries that fail to adhere to the standards. So this is something that can be improved, but this has to do with governments. And, you know, we're not always satisfied with governments. And for me, what's important is to think that change starts from you and from the small acts. For me, it's much more a total of small acts that everyone does than one big command from a government. So this is the solar cells we talked about. But what can we do? What can I do? Here is just a few things I thought about. So what I would invite you to do is right here in this place, make a small commitment. Maybe you're someone that doesn't care about the environment at all. I don't think this is the case. Maybe you're someone that cares a lot already. Wherever you are in this spectrum, you can do a tiny bit more. A tiny bit, you know, just the next step. So I can tell you what I would like to do. After coming back from Antarctica, I promised myself very concretely that I will never buy a car if I don't really need one, because, you know, I'm a person that mainly lives in the city. I can just take the metro or the bus, or the bike, even better. But I thought that even if at some point, Adrian, you do need so desperately to get a car, make sure it's an eco-friendly car, maybe an electric car, in a country that doesn't produce electricity by coal, but that's another story. So anyone has a little commitment to do? It's nothing big, you know. If you recycle, good, do something more. Maybe, by the way, complain here means react. It means that, you know, I see someone next to me who's not recycling. Just go tell this person in a kind way. It's so many times that we see people that are not even sensitive to doing something, and we don't talk, we don't complain. So I was thinking we can all take a minute to think about what can we improve. But unfortunately, I think we don't have a minute, because every minute in the planet, we have about 2 million plastic bags used and trashed, and, you know, it's a mess. And you have animals that die, and a million other things, actually. So, you know, it's very easy to think, oh, yeah, I thought about the environment today. What should I do? Well, let's think about work first, and then we'll see, you know, over the weekend, or over the summer vacation, or next year, or whatever. So this is my favorite picture of Antarctica. It's just outside of the station. And I love it very deeply because it shows equilibrium. So here you have the ice, the infinite ice, the sun, and the clouds. And I didn't mean to make it like that. It just happened. And it's quite evenly split. And equilibrium is very important in nature. So all I'm asking after all of this, and thanks for sharing, is just, before you go home today, just one little thing you can do extra to think about the future in the environment. I'd like to thank you very much and open the floor to questions, if there are any. And thanks for hearing me out.